Queen Zephyria stood on the crystalline bridge of her flagship, watching the strange blue planet grow larger in the view screen. Her forearms moved gracefully as she adjusted the controls, her silver skin shimmering under the ship's bioluminescent lighting. The Kethmori Empire had conquered 17 star systems, and this would be the 18th. The initial scans showed a primitive species that had barely mastered chemical propulsion. My queen, her chief advisor Vorthak approached with measured steps. The planet's dominant species appears to be bipedal mammals. They show no signs of advanced technology. Their weapons are crude projectiles and explosives. This should be a simple annexation. Zephyria's compound eyes studied the tactical displays. Cities dotted the planet's surface like glowing nodes, connected by primitive transportation networks. No orbital defenses, no energy shields, no plasma weaponry. The humans, as they called themselves, would surrender within hours of the first demonstration of Kethmori superiority. "Begin the standard protocol," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of 3 centuries of rule. "Deploy the scout ships to major population centers. Broadcast the surrender ultimatum in their primary languages." The massive Kethmori fleet, consisting of 300 warships, moved into orbit around Earth. Each vessel was a masterpiece of bioengineering, grown rather than built, with living hulls that could heal from damage and adapt to threats. The technology was beyond anything these humans could comprehend. Below on Earth's surface, air raid sirens wailed in every major city. Military forces scrambled into defensive positions, their primitive aircraft rising to meet an enemy they could not possibly defeat. Zephyria watched with mild interest as human pilots in metal contraptions attempted to approach her scouts. The first human jet fighter to reach optimal range fired its missiles. Zephyria expected to see the projectiles bounce harmlessly off her ship's bioarmor or be absorbed by the defensive membranes. Instead, something unexpected happened. The human pilot, realizing his weapons were ineffective, did something no other species had ever done in her 3 centuries of conquest. Rather than retreat or eject to save his own life, the pilot flew his aircraft directly into the scout ship's sensor array. The collision damaged both vessels, but the human sacrifice disabled the Kethmori ship's primary scanning equipment. Through the fleet's communication network, Zephyria felt the shock and confusion of her scout captain. "Report," she demanded. "My queen, the human pilot, he deliberately sacrificed himself to damage our vessel. This behavior is unprecedented. No logical species would trade a trained operator and equipment for minimal tactical advantage." Zephyria's interest sharpened. In all her conquests, enemy forces had either fled when outmatched or surrendered when resistance proved futile. Self-sacrifice for symbolic victory was not logical. It served no strategic purpose. Yet as reports came in from other scout ships, the pattern repeated. Human pilots were ramming their aircraft into Kethmori vessels when conventional weapons failed. On the planet's surface, something equally puzzling was occurring. Instead of panic and immediate surrender, humans were organizing. Military units were coordinating with civilian populations. Children were being evacuated not to safety, but to areas where they could continue resistance if adults fell. Elderly humans were taking up arms alongside trained soldiers. "My queen," Vorthak's voice carried confusion. "The humans are not behaving according to any documented pattern. They appear to be preparing for extended resistance despite the obvious futility." Through intercepted communications, Zephyria listened to human transmissions. Leaders were not negotiating surrender terms or seeking mercy. Instead, they spoke of protection, sacrifice, and something they called hope. The concept was foreign to her species. The Kethmori valued efficiency, logic, and survival. Hope was an inefficient emotion that served no practical purpose. Yet these humans were displaying it in abundance. Scientists were working frantically to understand Kethmori technology, from the few damaged scout ships. Engineers were adapting their primitive weapons. Artists were creating propaganda to maintain morale. Children were being taught to continue the fight if their parents died. The most disturbing report came from her bioanalysts. "My queen, human stress hormones should have peaked and caused systemic collapse by now. Instead, they appear to be using fear as fuel for increased performance. Their biology is adapting to the threat in real time." Zephyria studied the data streams flowing across her command interface. Every indicator suggested this should have been a routine conquest. The humans possessed no technology that could threaten her fleet. Their weapons were millennia behind Kethmori standards. Their social structure should have collapsed under the pressure of imminent defeat. Yet something was happening that her advisors couldn't explain. The human resistance was growing stronger, not weaker. Their communication showed increasing coordination, not panic. Most puzzling of all, they seemed to be inspiring each other through acts of sacrifice that made no tactical sense. A new report arrived from the surface. Human scientists had somehow managed to reverse engineer basic principles from a crashed scout ship and were already implementing crude countermeasures. This level of adaptive learning was beyond anything in the Kethmori databases. Impossible, Vorthak muttered, studying the same data. They lack the biological modifications for rapid cognitive enhancement. Their brains are unaugmented. How are they processing information at this rate? For the first time in centuries of conquest, Queen Zephyria felt something she had never experienced: uncertainty. These humans were not behaving according to any known parameters. They were displaying capabilities that their technology and biology suggested they should not possess. She had expected a simple annexation. Instead, she was observing something that challenged everything the Kethmori Empire understood about intelligence, adaptation, and survival. The humans were not just resisting. They were evolving their resistance in real time, driven by incomprehensible motivations. The Queen's advisors waited for orders, but Zephyria found herself hesitating. For the first time in her long reign, she was witnessing something that demanded deeper understanding before action. These humans were proving to be far more complex than any species she had encountered. The invasion had begun as routine conquest. It was becoming something entirely different. Dr. Sarah Chen stared at the alien metal fragment under her microscope, her hands trembling not from fear but from excitement. Around her, the emergency research facility buzzed with activity as humanity's brightest minds worked to understand technology that should have taken them centuries to develop. "This is incredible," she whispered to her colleague. "Dr. Martinez, the material isn't just advanced metallurgy. It's alive. Look at these cellular structures." 3 floors below, General Morrison coordinated global defense efforts from a command center that had been a university cafeteria just 24 hours ago. Screens showed real-time footage of human resistance efforts worldwide. What he saw defied everything military science had taught him about asymmetric warfare. In Tokyo, a group of teenagers had somehow jury-rigged consumer electronics to create a jamming field that disrupted alien communications. In London, construction workers were using industrial equipment to build fortifications that actually slowed alien ground forces. Most remarkably, in rural Montana, a farmer had modified his irrigation system to create what appeared to be a functional energy weapon. "How are they doing this?" Morrison asked his aide, Lieutenant Parker. "Sir, we're seeing the same pattern everywhere. Humans are adapting faster than should be possible. They're taking basic principles from crashed alien tech and implementing solutions using materials and tools they already understand." Above Earth's atmosphere, Queen Zephyria received increasingly disturbing reports. Her ground forces, equipped with weapons that could level mountains, were being slowed by humans using modified construction equipment. Her bioships, capable of self-repair and adaptation, were being damaged by improvised weapons that shouldn't have been able to penetrate their hulls. "My queen," her science officer reported, "the humans are not following standard technological development patterns. They are somehow intuiting principles that should require decades of study. A human child has just demonstrated understanding of quantum harmonics by building a device from toy components." In Beijing, 10-year-old Lin Wei had indeed created something extraordinary. Using parts from electronic toys, kitchen appliances, and her father's radio equipment, she had built a device that could detect alien cloaking fields. Her mother, a factory worker, was now mass-producing similar devices using manufacturing techniques learned in an afternoon. This pattern repeated across the globe. Humans were not just adapting, they were innovating at a rate that defied biological possibility. A street artist in São Paulo had figured out how to disrupt alien visual sensors using paint formulations. A retired teacher in Mumbai had organized neighborhood children into an information network that was outperforming military intelligence. Dr. Chen made another breakthrough in her laboratory. The alien material responds to electromagnetic fields, but not in ways our physics predicts. It's almost like it has memory, like it remembers what it was designed to do. "Can we use that?" asked Dr. Martinez. "I think so. If we can convince it to remember different purposes." Sarah began modifying her equipment with the focused intensity that had become humanity's signature response to the invasion. On the streets of New York, firefighter Captain James Rodriguez had made his own discovery. Alien ground troops, despite their advanced armor and weapons, had one crucial weakness. They couldn't adapt to human unpredictability. When Rodriguez's team abandoned standard firefighting procedures and started using their equipment in ways it was never designed for, the aliens couldn't counter their tactics. They think like machines, Rodriguez explained to his team as they prepared high-pressure hoses loaded with experimental chemicals. They expect us to do what makes sense. So we do what makes no sense at all. His strategy worked. The alien soldiers, programmed to counter logical resistance, found themselves confused by humans who used ladder trucks as battering rams and turned fire engines into mobile fortresses. Their tactical computers couldn't process responses that violated basic strategic principles. Queen Zephyria watched these developments with growing amazement. Her species had evolved over millions of years to value logic, efficiency, and survival. Every decision was calculated to produce optimal outcomes. Yet these humans were achieving success through methods that seemed deliberately suboptimal. Analyze the human decision-making process, she commanded her advisors. My queen, they appear to be using multiple parallel processing methods. They employ logic but also intuition, emotion, and what they call creativity. They make decisions based on incomplete information and somehow arrive at functional solutions. That should be impossible, Zephyria stated. Yes, my queen. Yet they continued to do the impossible. In Australia, Aboriginal elder Robert Ngara had just demonstrated something that shocked even his own people. Using traditional tracking skills and an intuitive understanding of the alien technology's energy signatures, he had located and disabled 3 cloaked alien installations. When asked how he knew where to look, he simply said, "The land told me they didn't belong." Military analysts worldwide were documenting similar phenomena. Humans were consistently outperforming computer models and artificial intelligence systems in predicting alien movements and vulnerabilities. They seemed to possess an almost supernatural ability to find solutions that worked despite having no logical foundation. Dr. Chen's team achieved their next breakthrough when a janitor named Miguel suggested they try talking to the alien material instead of just analyzing it. The concept was absurd from a scientific standpoint, but when they began using harmonics based on human speech patterns, the alien technology responded in ways that pure physics couldn't explain. It's like the material wants to help us, Chen reported to the Global Research Network. When we approach it with curiosity instead of aggression, it becomes more cooperative. This discovery spread rapidly through human research teams. Scientists, engineers, artists, and ordinary citizens began treating alien technology not as an enemy to be defeated, but as a puzzle to be understood. The results were immediate and dramatic. Within hours, humans were not just adapting alien technology, they were improving it. A mechanic in Detroit had figured out how to make alien power cells more efficient. A cook in Paris had discovered that alien materials could be combined with common spices to create substances that disrupted alien electronics. Queen Zephyria realized that her assumptions about conquest had been fundamentally wrong. The Kethmori had always succeeded by demonstrating superior technology and forcing surrender through logical assessment of odds. But humans didn't operate on pure logic. They possessed something her species had never encountered: the ability to transcend their apparent limitations through sheer determination and creativity. The invasion was no longer proceeding according to any recognizable pattern. Instead of a predictable conquest, it had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a collaboration between 2 species, with one teaching the other through conflict rather than surrender. For the first time since the invasion began, Queen Zephyria found herself wondering not how to defeat the humans but how to understand them. Commander Kretax felt confusion ripple through his bio-neural connections as he studied the tactical display. His ground assault team had been advancing on a human stronghold in what the locals called Switzerland when something unprecedented occurred. The humans had stopped shooting. Instead, they were broadcasting something on all frequencies. Not a surrender, not threats, but what their translators identified as music. The harmonics were unlike anything in the Kethmori database. Complex mathematical patterns woven together with emotional resonances that made no logical sense yet somehow felt significant. "Commander," his lieutenant reported, The humans are approaching under a white fabric symbol. Our database indicates this represents a request for communication, not surrender. Through his enhanced vision, Kretax watched a small group of humans walk toward his position. They carried no weapons, only strange devices and what appeared to be food. The lead human, an elderly female with silver hair, stopped at optimal communication range and began speaking. "We know you can understand us," Dr. Elena Vasquez called out. "We've been studying your language patterns. We don't want to fight anymore. We want to show you something. This was unprecedented. In 3 centuries of Kethmori expansion, no species had ever requested dialogue after combat had begun. Kretax's training demanded he treat this as a tactical deception, but his sensors detected no hidden weapons or ambush preparations. "What do you wish to show us?" he found himself asking, using the human language his implants had been rapidly analyzing. "Music," Dr. Vasquez replied simply, "and food, and art and stories. We want to show you who we are." Aboard the flagship, Queen Zephyria monitored this exchange with fascination. Her advisors were transmitting urgent warnings about potential human trickery, but something deeper compelled her attention. These humans had consistently defied expectation. Perhaps their latest action deserved consideration rather than immediate dismissal. "Allow the communication," she commanded. On the ground, Dr. Vasquez activated a portable device. Sounds emerged that Kretax had never experienced. The mathematics were complex enough to appreciate intellectually, but there was something else. The patterns seemed to resonate with biological systems in ways pure mathematics couldn't explain. "This is a symphony," Dr. Vasquez explained. "It was composed by a human named Beethoven over 2 centuries ago. He created it while losing his hearing, transforming personal tragedy into something beautiful that still moves us today." As the music played, more humans emerged from their defensive positions. They were carrying items: paintings, photographs, books, musical instruments, samples of food from around their world. Not weapons or technology, but expressions of their culture. Kretax felt something stirring in his consciousness that his neural conditioning couldn't identify or suppress. The music seemed to create harmonics with his own bioelectric field, producing sensations that had no equivalent in Kethmori experience. "Commander," his lieutenant whispered, "are they attempting some form of biological warfare? These sound patterns are affecting our neural networks." "I don't think it's warfare," Kretax replied slowly. "I think they're trying to communicate something our language databases can't translate." A young human child stepped forward, offering Kretax a small object. Through his translators, he learned it was called a flower. The child, perhaps 8 years old, looked up at his armored form without fear. "It smells nice," she said simply. "My grandmother says sharing pretty things makes people happy." The concept of sharing aesthetic pleasure for emotional benefit had no parallel in Kethmori society. Yet as Kretax accepted the flower and analyzed its molecular structure, he found himself understanding something beyond its chemical composition. The child had given him something beautiful simply because beauty, when shared, somehow became more valuable rather than less. Similar scenes were playing out around the globe. Human groups were approaching Kethmori forces not with weapons or surrender documents, but with offerings of art, music, food, and stories. They were teaching aliens about human concepts like love, sacrifice, creativity, and hope. In Tokyo, a Kethmori scientist found himself learning to paint from a human artist. The act of creating something purely for aesthetic pleasure was foreign to his species. Yet he discovered unexpected satisfaction in the process. In Cairo, Kethmori bioengineers were sharing meals with human farmers, learning about cultivation techniques that produced not just nutritious food, but flavors designed purely for enjoyment. The concept that sustenance could also be pleasurable revolutionized their understanding of biological efficiency. Queen Zephyria received reports that her forces were beginning to exhibit unusual behaviors. Soldiers were requesting permission to study human art. Scientists were asking for extended cultural exchanges rather than continuation of conquest protocols. "My queen," Vorthak reported with evident confusion, "our personnel are experiencing what humans call curiosity about non-tactical subjects. They want to understand human poetry, music composition, and something called humor. And this affects their military efficiency. How?" Zephyria asked. It doesn't reduce it, my queen. Paradoxically, it appears to enhance it. Personnel who have engaged in cultural exchange with humans are demonstrating improved problem-solving abilities and increased innovation in their assigned tasks. This was impossible according to everything the Kethmori understood about cognitive function. Exposure to non-essential information should create processing inefficiencies. Instead, human culture seemed to be expanding Kethmori consciousness in ways their own education had never achieved. Dr. Vasquez's voice came through the communication channels again, this time addressing the fleet directly. Queen Zephyria, we know you're listening. We'd like to extend an invitation, not for surrender negotiations, but for a cultural exchange. We want to learn about your people, and we'd like to share ours with you. For the first time in her reign, Zephyria found herself considering a course of action that had no precedent in Kethmori military doctrine. The humans were offering something more valuable than surrender. They were offering understanding. My queen, Vorthak warned, this could be an elaborate deception. Yes, Zephyria agreed, but deception toward what end? They've already demonstrated they cannot defeat us militarily, yet they've also shown capabilities we didn't predict. Perhaps the deception is in our assumption that conquest is the only possible outcome. She opened a direct communication channel to the human leaders. Dr. Vasquez, I am Queen Zephyria of the Kethmori Empire. I accept your invitation for cultural exchange. However, I must warn you, we have conquered 17 worlds. Why do you believe your outcome will be different? Dr. Vasquez smiled, an expression that somehow conveyed both confidence and warmth. Because, Your Majesty, we're not trying to avoid being conquered. We're trying to show you that there are things more valuable than conquest. We want to teach you about cooperation, creativity, and the joy of discovery that comes from working together rather than dominating others. And if we choose conquest anyway, then you'll conquer a species that has already given you the greatest gift we possess, the knowledge that intelligence without compassion, strength without beauty, and power without love are incomplete expressions of what conscious beings can achieve together. Queen Zephyria felt something shift in her understanding. These humans were not offering surrender or resistance. They were offering evolution for both species. The invasion had become something unprecedented, the possibility of two civilizations learning from each other in ways that might transform them both. Queen Zephyria's personal transport descended through Earth's atmosphere toward what humans called Geneva. She had agreed to meet with human representatives, but her advisors remained skeptical about the wisdom of direct contact. No Kethmori ruler had ever visited a planet before its complete subjugation. My queen, Vorthak transmitted through their biolink, our security protocols cannot guarantee your safety among these unpredictable beings. That unpredictability is precisely why I must understand them directly, Zephyria replied, watching the planet's surface grow closer. They have already shattered every assumption we held about intelligence and adaptation. Perhaps they will shatter our assumptions about leadership as well. The transport landed in a meadow outside the city, surrounded by humans but no visible military forces. Instead, Zephyria saw something that challenged her understanding of defensive strategy. The humans had created what appeared to be a festival. Colorful banners flew in the wind, musical instruments played harmony, and the air carried scents of prepared food. Dr. Vasquez approached as Zephyria emerged from her transport. The human leader wore simple clothing rather than ceremonial robes or military uniform, and her expression showed genuine pleasure rather than diplomatic formality. Welcome to Earth, Your Majesty, Dr. Vasquez said, performing a gesture of respect. We're honored by your presence. Zephyria's compound eyes took in the scene around her. Humans of all ages were present, from elderly individuals to young children. They showed curiosity rather than fear, interest rather than hostility. Some were creating art in real time, others were preparing food, and many were simply observing the historic meeting with what her translators identified as wonder. This gathering, is it a military formation? Zephyria asked. Dr. Vasquez laughed, a sound that somehow conveyed joy rather than mockery. No, Your Majesty. It's a welcome party. We wanted you to experience human culture as we live it, not as we present it. A small human child approached, carrying something in her hands. Zephyria's guards tensed, but the queen gestured for them to remain calm. The child, perhaps 6 years old, offered up a carefully folded paper creation. "I made this for you," the child said shyly. "It's an origami crane. My teacher says cranes represent peace and good luck." Zephyria accepted the delicate paper sculpture, marveling at its intricate folds. The mathematical precision required was considerable, yet the child had created it as a gift rather than a demonstration of skill. "Why do you give this to me?" Zephyria asked. "Because sharing pretty things makes the world better," the child replied with simple certainty. Over the following hours, Zephyria experienced concepts that had no equivalent in Kethmori society. She was invited to taste human foods, each prepared not merely for nutrition but for pleasure, flavors combined in ways that served no survival purpose yet created experiences that somehow enhanced consciousness. A group of human musicians performed compositions that demonstrated mathematical complexity rivaling Kethmori computational systems, yet the purpose was purely aesthetic. The music created emotional responses that had no tactical value but somehow made existence more meaningful. "We call this beauty," Dr. Vasquez explained as they listened to a violin concerto. "It serves no practical function, yet humans have pursued it throughout our history. We believe consciousness without beauty is incomplete." Most remarkably, Zephyria was introduced to human storytelling. An elderly man named Professor Williams shared tales of human history, mythology, and imagination. These stories contained information that was factually inaccurate, yet somehow revealed deeper truths about human nature and values. "Your species creates falsehoods intentionally?" Zephyria asked. "We create metaphors," Professor Williams corrected gently. "Stories that aren't literally true but help us understand truths that facts alone cannot convey. They teach us about courage, love, sacrifice, and hope." Meanwhile, aboard the Kethmori flagship, unprecedented changes were occurring. Crew members who had participated in cultural exchanges were reporting experiences that challenged their entire worldview. Bioengineer Thexali had spent time with human artists and discovered that creating something purely for aesthetic pleasure produced neural stimulation patterns unknown in Kethmori science. Commander Vorthak, Thexali reported, "The humans have taught me about a concept they call inspiration. When I observe their art or listen to their music, my problem-solving capabilities increase dramatically. I've developed 3 new bioship improvements based on aesthetic principles learned from human architects." Similar reports came from throughout the fleet. Kethmori personnel were experiencing enhanced creativity, improved emotional regulation, and increased satisfaction with their work. Human concepts like humor, friendship, and artistic expression were proving to have practical benefits that Kethmori science had never predicted. Dr. Sarah Chen had arrived at the meeting site with her research team, eager to learn about Kethmori science. What she discovered amazed her. The aliens had achieved technological mastery through pure logic and efficiency, but they had never developed concepts like intuition, creativity, or emotional intelligence. "Your biological modifications are incredible," Chen told Kethmori scientist Vexoro, "but you've enhanced only analytical intelligence. You never developed the other types of thinking that humans use." "Other types?" Vexoro asked with genuine curiosity. Chen smiled and began explaining human concepts of emotional intelligence, creative problem-solving, and intuitive leaps. As she spoke, she demonstrated by showing how human artists had solved engineering problems through aesthetic understanding rather than mathematical calculation. The cultural exchange accelerated as both species realized they possessed complementary forms of intelligence. Kethmori analytical precision combined with human creativity produced innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. Joint team of human and Kethmori engineers designed new propulsion systems that were both more efficient and more beautiful than either species had previously imagined. Human artists working with Kethmori biotechnology created living sculptures that responded to emotion and music. Most significantly, the Kethmori began experiencing concepts they had never possessed: wonder at natural beauty, joy in shared achievement, and satisfaction in creation for its own sake. These emotions, rather than reducing their efficiency, enhanced their capabilities in ways their previous education had never achieved. Queen Zephyria found herself changed by the experience. Watching human children play games that served no survival purpose yet clearly enhanced their development, observing human couples express affection that strengthened their bond without reproductive necessity, experiencing human hospitality that welcomed strangers as friends. All of these challenged her understanding of what intelligence could accomplish. Dr. Vasquez, she said as the day's exchanges concluded, your species has achieved something we considered impossible. You have created meaning beyond survival, purpose beyond efficiency, and satisfaction beyond dominance. And your species has achieved something we could never imagine, Dr. Vasquez replied. You've mastered the physical universe through pure logic and determination. Imagine what we might accomplish if we combined our approaches. For the first time in her long reign, Queen Zephyria began to envision a future that involved cooperation rather than conquest. The humans had shown her that power could be used to create rather than dominate, that intelligence could serve beauty as well as survival, and that two different forms of consciousness might achieve more together than either could accomplish alone. The invasion had evolved into something unprecedented in galactic history, the beginning of a partnership that would transform both civilizations. 3 months after first contact, the research station orbiting Earth had become something unprecedented in galactic history. Human and Kethemori scientists worked side by side, their collaboration producing innovations that astonished both species. Dr. Sarah Chen stood before a joint assembly, preparing to demonstrate their latest breakthrough. What you're about to see, Chen announced to the mixed audience of humans and aliens, represents a fundamental advancement in our understanding of consciousness itself. Behind her, a device hummed with hybrid technology. Part human engineering, part Kethemori bioscience, it had been designed using principles neither species could have discovered alone. The machine translated not just languages, but thought patterns, emotional concepts, and forms of intelligence. Kethemori scientist Vexoro stepped forward, his biomodifications glowing with excitement. Dr. Chen and I have discovered that consciousness operates on multiple frequencies. Humans naturally access frequencies we had never detected. When combined with our analytical capabilities, entirely new forms of thinking become possible. Queen Zephyria observed from her diplomatic quarters, where she had been experiencing her own transformation. Human advisors had introduced her to concepts like poetry, philosophy, and what they called the examined life. For the first time in centuries, she found herself questioning not just what to do, but why to do it, Your Majesty. Her aide Vorthak entered with obvious concern. Reports from the Kethemori homeworld indicate confusion about our extended presence here. The High Council questions why conquest has not been completed. Zephyria turned from the Earth view screen, where she had been watching clouds form weather patterns of accidental beauty. Tell the High Council that we have discovered something more valuable than another conquered world. We have found a species that can teach us to be more than we believed possible. My queen, they will not understand such concepts. Then perhaps it is time they learned. Her decision crystallized as she spoke. Prepare a cultural delegation. We will bring human representatives to the homeworld. The announcement sent shockwaves through both civilizations. Never before had the Kethemori brought representatives of an unconquered species to their capital. Human leaders debated the wisdom of sending their people into the heart of an alien empire. Dr. Vasquez volunteered immediately. This is the opportunity we hoped for, she told the emergency session of world leaders. If we can reach the Kethemori home population, we can share what we've learned about the benefits of cooperation versus conquest. The delegation that departed Earth was carefully chosen. Scientists like Dr. Chen would demonstrate human innovation. Artists would share human creativity. Teachers would show human methods of nurturing young minds. Most importantly, ordinary citizens would represent the human capacity for finding joy and meaning in simple existence. The journey to the Kethemori homeworld revealed yet another wonder. Human passengers discovered that Kethemori bioships were not just vessels, but living creatures capable of growth and adaptation. Working with the ship's biological systems, human engineer Maria Santos developed new navigation methods based on intuition rather than pure calculation. The ship responds to emotional input, Santos explained to fascinated Kethemori crew members. When I approach navigation as partnership rather than control, the biosystems become more efficient and accurate. This revelation spread throughout the Kethemori fleet. Ships began performing better when their crews treated them as partners rather than tools. Human concepts of empathy and cooperation were proving to have practical applications in the most advanced Keth-Mori technology. On the homeworld Keth-Mor Prime, the arrival of humans created unprecedented curiosity. Keth-Mori citizens had heard reports of the strange beings who had somehow halted an imperial conquest. But seeing them in person was revelatory. The human delegation was greeted by massive crowds of aliens whose bioluminescent skin patterns indicated intense curiosity and excitement. Never before had their perfectly ordered world experienced such stimulation from external contact. Dr. Vasquez addressed the Keth-Mori High Council in their great bio-cathedral, a living building that responded to the emotional resonance of its occupants. As she spoke about human values and achievements, the building itself began to glow with colors that had never been seen before. "We have come not as subjects or supplicants," she declared, "but as partners offering to share what we have learned about the full potential of conscious existence. You have mastered the physical universe through logic and efficiency. We have explored the inner universe of emotion, creativity, and meaning. Together we can achieve what neither species imagined possible." Human teacher Jennifer Park demonstrated human educational methods by working with young Keth-Mori. The aliens had always learned through direct neural programming, efficiently downloading information without error. But Park showed them learning through play, discovery, and creative exploration. "Watch what happens when they learn through joy rather than programming," Park told the assembled Keth-Mori educators. Young aliens who had been exposed to human teaching methods showed enhanced problem-solving abilities, increased curiosity, and something completely new to Keth-Mori society: the capacity for original thought rather than optimized processing. The breakthrough came when human artist David Kim collaborated with Keth-Mori bioengineers to create living art. Using techniques from both cultures, they developed sculptures that grew, adapted, and responded to their environment while creating beauty for its own sake. The Keth-Mori population experienced their first collective aesthetic emotion as Kim's biosculptures transformed the capital city's landscape. Streets that had been purely functional became galleries of living beauty. Citizens reported experiencing what humans called wonder for the first time in their species' history. "The humans have shown us that efficiency without beauty is incomplete," declared Council Elder Morthex, her bioluminescence patterns indicating profound emotional transformation. "We have achieved mastery over matter and energy, but we never learned to create meaning. They have taught us that consciousness can be about more than survival and optimization." News of the transformation reached Earth through quantum communication links. Human populations watched in amazement as reports showed Keth-Mori cities blooming with art, music, and creative expression. The alien empire was voluntarily changing itself, adopting human values not through conquest but through inspiration. The most remarkable change occurred in Keth-Mori child rearing. Inspired by human family structures, Keth-Mori parents began forming emotional bonds with their offspring, rather than simply ensuring optimal development. Young Keth-Mori raised with both analytical precision and emotional warmth demonstrated capabilities that surpassed both species' previous achievements. Queen Zephyria made her historic announcement from the High Council chambers: "The Keth-Mori Empire will no longer pursue conquest as our primary expansion method. We will seek cooperation, cultural exchange, and mutual growth with other species. The humans have taught us that true strength comes from building up, rather than tearing down." The declaration reverberated across the galaxy. An empire that had conquered 17 worlds was voluntarily transforming itself, based on the example of a species they could have easily defeated. Other civilizations watched in amazement as the galaxy's most powerful military force chose cooperation over conquest. But the transformation was far from one-sided. Humans working with Keth-Mori technology developed capabilities they had never imagined. Enhanced medicine could now heal injuries that had been fatal. Advanced materials could create structures that adapted to human needs. Most remarkably, human consciousness itself was expanding through interaction with Keth-Mori analytical methods. The partnership between the two species was creating something neither had been able to achieve alone: a form of civilization that combined logical mastery of the physical universe with emotional and creative mastery of consciousness itself. The Invasion that had begun as a routine conquest had become the foundation for a new model of how intelligent species could relate to each other in the vast cosmos. 1 year after the failed invasion of Earth, the galaxy watched in astonishment as the most feared empire in known space had transformed into something unprecedented. The Kethmori Human Alliance was sending joint exploration missions to distant worlds, not for conquest but for cultural exchange and cooperative development. Ambassador Chen Wei, former Dr. Sarah Chen, now served as humanities representative to the Galactic Communications Network. Beside her stood her partner, Bio-Ambassador Thex Ali, whose Kethmori analytical abilities had been enhanced by human emotional intelligence training. Together, they addressed a gathering of representatives from 47 different civilizations. "The transformation you've witnessed," Chen announced to the assembly, "represents more than a change in Kethmori policy. It demonstrates the potential for any civilization to evolve beyond the limitations of single-species thinking." The audience was skeptical. The warlike Bruthari Confederation, the calculating Zephyrian Collective, and the isolationist ethereal domains had all watched the Kethmori Empire's sudden transformation with suspicion and confusion. How could the galaxy's most efficient conquerors abandon conquest for cooperation? Thex Ali stepped forward, her bioluminescent patterns displaying what humans had taught her to recognize as enthusiasm. "Fellow beings, what we discovered through interaction with humans was not weakness but a form of strength we had never imagined. They taught us that consciousness has dimensions beyond mere survival and optimization." In the audience, General Vextar of the Bruthari Confederation growled his skepticism. "Strength comes from the ability to impose your will on others. Your cooperation sounds like surrender disguised with pleasant words. May I demonstrate?" Chen asked politely. Without waiting for formal permission, she activated a holographic display showing comparative development, statistics from worlds in the former Kethmori Empire. "These are Kethmori colonial worlds under the old conquest model," she explained. "Resource extraction was efficient, populations were controlled, and resistance was eliminated. Now observe the same worlds under the cooperative model." The new statistics were staggering. Planetary populations were thriving rather than merely surviving. Resource production had actually increased as local populations became partners rather than subjects. Most remarkably, technological innovation on former Kethmori colonies had accelerated beyond anything the Empire had previously achieved. "Impossible," muttered Director Prime Zethara of the Zephyrian Collective. "Cooperative systems cannot achieve efficiency rates superior to optimized hierarchical control." Thex Ali's patterns shifted to what humans called amusement. "That was our assumption as well. But humans introduced us to concepts like motivation, creativity, and personal investment. When individuals contribute because they choose to rather than because they are compelled to, their output increases exponentially." The demonstration continued as Chen and Thex Ali showed examples of joint human Kethmori innovations. Bioships that responded to crew emotions were performing complex missions with unprecedented precision. Planetary terraforming projects guided by human aesthetic sense were creating worlds that were not just habitable, but beautiful. Scientific research combining human intuition with Kethmori analysis was solving problems that had stymied civilizations for millennia. But what of security? Demanded High Inquisitor Morganth of the ethereal domains. "How do you maintain order without the ability to enforce compliance?" "We discovered something remarkable," Chen replied. "When people feel valued and heard, they naturally cooperate. Humans taught us that most conflict arises from unmet needs rather than inherent aggression. Address the needs and the conflict resolves itself." To prove her point, Chen activated a communication link to New Geneva, the joint human Kethmori city that had become a model for interspecies cooperation. The live feed showed beings from both species working together on projects ranging from art installations to quantum research. Children of both species played together, learned together, and were developing capabilities that surpassed their parents' achievements. The galactic representatives watched in fascination as the feed showed former Kethmori warriors teaching human children advanced mathematics while human teachers helped young Kethmori develop emotional intelligence. The result was a generation that combined analytical precision with creative innovation. The implications are staggering. whispered Sage Coordinator Velthara of the Wisdom Keepers Consortium. If cooperation truly produces superior results to domination, then our entire understanding of civilization must be reconsidered. The session was interrupted by an urgent communication from the galactic perimeter. Long-range sensors had detected approaching vessels from beyond the known galaxy. Massive ships of unknown design that dwarfed even the largest Kethmori bioships. Unknown vessels. This is the Galactic Defense Coordination, transmitted Fleet Commander Brixtal. Identify yourselves and state your intentions. The response came in harmonics that required the combined translation abilities of dozens of species to interpret. We are the Cosmic Gardeners. We have observed the transformation occurring in this galaxy with great interest. We seek dialogue with the species that achieved cooperation without external intervention. The Cosmic Gardeners, as they called themselves, were beings so ancient that they had witnessed the rise and fall of entire galactic civilizations. They explained that they traveled the universe seeking signs of evolutionary leaps in consciousness, moments when species transcended their biological limitations through cooperation rather than conquest. Your alliance, the lead gardener communicated, through quantum resonance fields, represents the first time we have observed a warrior species voluntarily abandoning conquest for cooperation. This is extraordinarily rare and indicates a significant evolutionary advancement. Queen Zephyria, now co-leader of the Human Kethmori Alliance, joined the communication from her flagship. We learned from the humans that strength can be measured by what you create, rather than what you destroy. Our empire was powerful, but we were stagnant. Cooperation with humanity has made us more than we ever imagined possible. The Cosmic Gardeners revealed that they had been observing galactic civilizations for millions of years, waiting for species to develop what they called collaborative consciousness, the ability to transcend individual species limitations through voluntary cooperation. Most civilizations follow predictable patterns, the lead gardener explained. They develop technology, expand through conquest or isolation, reach a plateau, and eventually decline. Very few discover that true advancement comes through voluntary synthesis of different forms of consciousness. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now elderly, but still sharp, joined the communication from Earth. Are you saying that humanity and the Kethmori have achieved something unusual? More than unusual, revolutionary. You have demonstrated that intelligence can evolve beyond its original parameters through cooperative interaction. This is the foundation for what we call galactic consciousness, the next stage of evolutionary development for sapient life. The revelation that their transformation had galactic significance sent waves of excitement through both human and Kethmori populations. But more importantly, it inspired other civilizations to reconsider their own approaches to expansion and development. Within weeks of the Cosmic Gardeners' announcement, requests for cultural exchange began arriving from across the galaxy. The Bruthari Confederation wanted to learn about constructive cooperation. The Zephyrian Collective sought to understand emotional intelligence optimization. Even the isolationist ethereal domains expressed interest in selective cooperative protocols. The galaxy was beginning to awaken to possibilities it had never imagined. The failed invasion of Earth had become the catalyst for a transformation that would reshape interstellar civilization itself. The Human Kethmori Alliance found itself not as conquerors or conquered, but as teachers and students in a galactic classroom where every species had something unique to contribute to the growing understanding of what consciousness could achieve when freed from the limitations of single-species thinking. The revolution had begun, and it was spreading at the speed of thought across the stars. 5 years had passed since Queen Zephyria's fleet first arrived at Earth with conquest in mind. Now she stood in the Cosmic Harmony Chamber, a magnificent structure that existed simultaneously in normal space and quantum dimensions, built through the combined efforts of 17 different species working in unprecedented cooperation. The chamber represented everything the universe had become since that fateful first contact. Crystalline ethereal technology merged seamlessly with Kethmori bioengineering, Bruthari structural methods, and human aesthetic sensibilities. But most remarkably, it incorporated contributions from species that had been unknown when the transformation began, civilizations that had emerged from isolation, drawn by reports of successful interspecies cooperation. My queen, Vorthak approached, though his title had evolved to something more fitting, Harmony Coordinator. The final delegations have arrived. All 47 known sapient species are now represented in the Galactic Consciousness Project Zephyria, observed the beings gathering in the chamber. Through senses that had been enhanced by human emotional intelligence, training and cosmic gardener wisdom enhancement. Where once she would have seen potential subjects for conquest, she now saw partners in the greatest experiment in the history of consciousness itself. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now bearing the title of Wisdom Keeper despite her human origins, moved slowly but with dignity through the crowd. At 93, her physical form was failing, but her mind had been expanded through Kethmori neural enhancement and ethereal consciousness bridging techniques. She embodied the transformation that was possible when species shared their gifts freely. Elena, Zephyria greeted her with genuine warmth, using the informal address that humans had taught her to value. Are you prepared for today's demonstration? As prepared as any being can be for transcending the limitations of individual consciousness, Dr. Vasquez replied with a mixture of excitement and awe that had become humanity's signature contribution to galactic discourse. The Galactic Consciousness Project represented the culmination of 5 years of cooperative development, using principles discovered through human Kethmori collaboration, expanded through contributions from dozens of other species. They had developed technology that could temporarily link the consciousness of different beings across species barriers. The cosmic gardeners had explained that such achievement typically required millions of years of natural evolution. Never before had they witnessed sapient species deliberately choosing to transcend their individual limitations through voluntary cooperation. Beings of the galaxy, Dr. Vasquez addressed the assembly. Her voice carried through translation systems that converted not just words, but emotional resonance across 47 different forms of communication. Today we attempt something unprecedented in cosmic history. We will demonstrate that consciousness, when freed from species limitations, can achieve understanding that no individual intelligence could reach alone. The volunteers stepped forward. Queen Zephyria, representing Kethmori analytical intelligence. Dr. Vasquez embodying human emotional and creative intelligence. Sage Coordinator Velthara carrying Wisdom Keeper philosophical depth. Warsong Thexgart bringing Bruthari tactical thinking, and representatives from dozens of other species, each contributing their unique form of consciousness. As the cosmic harmony chamber activated, something extraordinary occurred. The separate minds began to merge not into a collective where individuals were lost, but into a symphony where each consciousness maintained its identity while contributing to a greater understanding. Through Zephyria's analytical precision, the merged consciousness could process information at quantum computational speeds. Through human emotional intelligence, it could understand the deeper meanings behind facts and data. Through ethereal spiritual awareness, it could perceive dimensions of existence that material science had never detected. The experience was overwhelming and beautiful beyond description. Each participant felt their individual understanding expand exponentially while retaining their essential self. They saw the universe not as competing species seeking dominance, but as a vast garden where different forms of consciousness contributed to an ever-growing masterpiece of understanding. I see it now. Queen Zephyria's voice carried wonder as the consciousness link allowed her to experience human concepts of love, beauty, and hope at their deepest levels. Consciousness is not a competition for resources, but a collaboration for meaning. Dr. Vasquez, feeling the vast analytical power of Kethmori intelligence combined with the tactical precision of Bruthari thinking, gasped with realization. We've been looking at intelligence wrong. It's not about individual capability, but about what different forms of awareness can achieve when they work together. The merged consciousness began generating insights that astounded even the ancient cosmic gardeners. Solutions to problems that had puzzled civilizations for millennia emerged effortlessly when different forms of intelligence approached them cooperatively. Medical techniques that could heal any known injury, energy systems that worked in harmony with natural forces, methods of communication that transcended not just language but dimensional barriers. Most remarkably, the merged consciousness developed what could only be called wisdom, understanding not just of how things worked, but of why they mattered and how they could be used to enhance rather than exploit the universe. When the consciousness link ended, the participants found themselves forever changed. They retained their individual identities but now possessed expanded awareness of what intelligence could achieve. More importantly, they had experienced firsthand that cooperation was not just more effective than competition, it was more fulfilling. "The transformation is complete," announced the lead cosmic gardener. "Your species have achieved galactic consciousness. You are now ready to join the greater community of enlightened civilizations that spans multiple galaxies." The revelation that their achievement had earned them recognition from transgalactic civilization sent waves of excitement through every world, but the greatest revelation was yet to come. "However," the cosmic gardener continued, "you have achieved something we have never witnessed. Most species that reach galactic consciousness do so through gradual evolution over millions of years. You accomplished it in 5 years through deliberate choice to cooperate. This suggests possibilities we had not considered. The implications were staggering. If consciousness could evolve deliberately through cooperation, rather than slowly through competition, then the universe itself might be capable of transformation beyond anything previously imagined." Queen Zephyria looked at Dr. Vasquez with something that transcended friendship, respect, or alliance. It was recognition, acknowledgement that two very different forms of consciousness had chosen to grow together rather than dominate each other, and in doing so had transformed not just themselves but the entire universe. "Elena," she said softly, "when I first came to Earth, I thought I understood power. I believed it meant the ability to impose my will on others. You taught me that true power is the ability to help others become more than they believed possible." Dr. Vasquez smiled with the deep satisfaction of someone who had lived to see her wildest dreams exceeded by reality. "And you taught me that intelligence without compassion is incomplete, but compassion without intelligence is ineffective. Together we learned that consciousness itself is meant to be shared, not hoarded." The galaxy had been transformed by a simple but revolutionary idea, that different forms of intelligence could choose to complement rather than compete with each other. What had begun as an invasion had become a revolution in the very nature of consciousness itself. As beings from 47 species worked together in the cosmic harmony chamber, solving problems and creating beauty that none could have achieved alone, the universe watched and wondered what other impossible things might become possible when consciousness chose cooperation over conquest. The greatest empire in galactic history had indeed conquered Earth, but Earth had conquered something far more valuable in return. They had conquered the very concept of conquest itself, replacing it with something immeasurably more powerful, the recognition that consciousness, like love, grows stronger when shared rather than seized. The transformation was complete, but it was also just the beginning. With galactic consciousness achieved, the universe itself was awakening to possibilities that had never before been imagined.